Economic might, like military might, is part of a country's hard power, and India is working to strengthen both. India has more hard power today than ever before. But what about soft power? That too is on the rise. In fact, India's soft power story is an amazing one. But before I tell you that story, let me show you some images from the city of Ahmedabad today. It's the capital of Gujarat, Prime Minister Modi's home state. Take a look at this. You can see Indian Prime Minister Modi with his Australian counterpart Anthony Albanese. They are waving to cheering crowds at the Motera Stadium, now called the Narendra Modi Stadium. India is leading the 4-match test series 2-1. The Australian Prime Minister is visiting India and celebrating 75 years of cricket friendship. This is being called cricket diplomacy. Just before this, the headline spoke of Holi diplomacy, again featuring the Australian Prime Minister. Yesterday, the US Secretary of Commerce was seen dancing with India's Defence Minister. In another event, diplomats from various missions were seen shaking a leg at the Holi party of Meenakshi Lekhi. She is the Junior Minister for External Affairs. What do these images tell you? This is much more than song and dance. This is world leaders celebrating Indian culture. This is diplomacy and a testament to India's rising soft power. When India became independent, it only had soft power, no military. Indians were seen as a people who ousted the mighty British on the strength of their moral force. India used the richness of its culture to compensate for its hard power deficiencies. It became a crusader against imperial forces, an opponent of war, and a spokesperson of other post-colonial countries. In the post-Nehru era, India tried to acquire hard power. With the nuclear test of 1974 and the imposition of emergency in 1975, India lost the moral high ground taken by Gandhi. By 1998, when India declared itself a nuclear state, its soft power had eroded significantly. But today's India is different. Today's India is not ready to trade one form of power for another. India's hard power has grown along with its soft power. India is among the fastest growing economies in the world's biggest arms importer, with a space mission to the moon and Mars. At the same time, India is a vocal champion of the global south. It is calling for United Nations reform, contributing to peacekeeping missions, exporting wheat to the world, providing vaccines and medicines. Today's India is confident about its identity and place in the world. It can draw from its civilizational richness and promote yoga and Ayurveda. It can also flex its military muscle and conduct surgical strikes in Pakistan. And the cherry on the cake, India dominates the originally British sport of cricket. It is central, India is central to the global cricket economy. The Indian board, BCCI, is the richest cricket board in the world by a mile. The net worth of the International Cricket Council, the governing body of cricket, is said to be a little over $2.5 billion. Compare this with the net worth of just the BCCI, $2.25 billion. The next richest cricket board is Australia. It's worth $70 million. You see the gap. If the Indian Cricket Board is doing well, our players are doing even better. Indian players hold some of the top records in the world. Sachin Tendulkar holds the records for the most international matches, maximum career runs, maximum number of centuries. Who can forget his 100 hundreds? Our current captain, Rohit Sharma, holds the record for the highest individual ODI score. His predecessor, Virat Kohli, has a few accolades to his name as well. He has the most runs in T20 internationals. Kohli also holds the record for scoring the maximum runs in a single IPL season. IPL is the Indian Premier League. It is the most watched format of the sport. In the entire history of cricket, only 3 bowlers have bagged all the wickets in an innings. One of them is India's former captain and coach, Anil Kumble, who sent the entire Pakistani team packing in 1999. India is the undisputed cricket superpower, and these images are proof. It's not a coincidence that world leaders are making a beeline to India. This year is going to be packed with diplomatic events and high-profile visits. It will mean a lot of work, but also reason to celebrate. We're wrapping up with these images of the Indian cricket team celebrating Holi. And now let's talk about the United States. It calls India its strategic partner. It is getting ready to host the Indian Prime Minister this summer for a state visit. But there's a gaping hole in this relationship. 2 years into the Biden presidency, the United States still does not have an ambassador in India. Why is that? It's because Biden's pick is controversial, and he's adamant about having his way. We are talking about a man called Eric Garcetti. He's the former mayor of Los Angeles. His tenure was riddled with scandals. His case has been held up since the day it was proposed. But Joe Biden refuses to explore alternatives. He keeps coming back to Garcetti for some reason. In January, the United States president overlooked the scandals and re-nominated Garcetti for the post of the US ambassador to India. And now the man is one step closer towards securing the job. A key panel of lawmakers has signed off on the nomination. But it's not a done deal yet. In the next step, Garcetti's candidacy will be put to vote. And it looks like he finally has the support he needs. So he may eventually come. But the whole saga has cast a shadow on the Biden administration's India strategy. From the day it was announced, the choice of Garcetti was a lost opportunity. The choice of the ambassador could have been a statement. It could have communicated America's intent to deepen ties with India, but Team Biden refuses to learn from their mistakes. Garcetti remains a controversial pick, but Biden continues to back him. And why is he controversial? It's because of a sexual harassment scandal. It happened when he was still the mayor of Los Angeles. One of Garcetti's top aides, Rick Jacobs, faced accusations of sexual harassment. A lawsuit was filed, and the mayor insisted he had no idea about this. But an investigation found otherwise. It said it was highly unlikely, and I'm quoting from what the investigation found, it was highly unlikely that Garcetti was unaware of what was going on. The probe was led by a Republican senator. These claims have damaged Garcetti's candidature. He is believed to be close to Joe Biden. Apparently, he was in the running for a cabinet position. But the Rick Jacobs controversy derailed that. It also scuttled his bid for ambassadorship. And that's not all. Like I told you before, Garcetti served as the mayor of Los Angeles. Let's look at some of the highlights of his tenure there. When he was in office, one city council member was sent to prison. This was in a corruption case. Another former deputy mayor faced a bribery trial. And there are more like him. A former head of the Water and Power Department pleaded guilty in a different bribery case. Garcetti's own chief of staff was caught up in a scandal. He was sent on leave for several months. This was over some insulting social media posts. And all of this happened when Garcetti was still in office. We must point out here that he is not personally linked to any of these cases. But America's second largest city was mired in scandals under him, and it does raise questions about his leadership. What kind of office was he running? During his tenure, the reputation of the Los Angeles government was tarnished, and people lost faith in the leadership. So when the US picks their top diplomat for their strategic partner like India, is Eric Garcetti the best they can do? Is he the best choice? Has President Biden sacrificed the best interest of this relationship to push for his candidate? Like I said, the position of the US ambassador has been vacant for 2 years now, and this is the longest gap ever. The last time something like this happened was in the 1990s when Bill Clinton was president. It took 16 months for the US to send their ambassador to India. Then Thomas Pickering, the last ambassador, left his post in March 1993. He was replaced by Frank Wisner in July 1994. But in Biden's case, it has been over 24 months and counting. India still doesn't have a US ambassador, which puts India in the same bracket as countries like Azerbaijan, Cambodia, Ecuador, Nigeria, Rwanda, and Zimbabwe, just to name a few. As of December 2022, as many as 20 ambassadorial nominations were still pending. And Indian officials are not happy with the way this case has been handled. There is no continuity or stability. American officials say this affair has become an embarrassment. Senator Mark Warner, chairman of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, said, and I'm quoting, "It is an embarrassment that we say this is one of the most valuable relationships in the world, and yet we've not appointed an ambassador." And while India waits for an ambassador, who manages the US mission in India in the meantime? The Charge d'Affaires. Usually, it's an American diplomat. In the last 2 years, multiple American diplomats have served on this post. So there is no continuity. And again, this is supposedly one of the most important allies of the US we're talking about. Biden has called India a quote-unquote indispensable partner, an important relationship, but he's not been able to find a top diplomat to serve in India. Would the US administration treat its other allies the same way? Can it go without an ambassador in Brussels, for instance, or Paris or London? And this is not to question Washington's commitment. They need India on their side. And India is perhaps one of the few partners that enjoys bipartisan support in the US Congress. But in the case of the missing ambassador, surely Team Biden could have done better. This week we talked about gender equality and how it will take 300 years to achieve it. For our last story today, we have something that looks like a step forward in the right direction. For the first time in history, women are represented in every parliament around the world. Now, this is based on data from 47 countries that held elections last year. Women took about 26% of the available seats. In simpler terms, 1 in 4 lawmakers worldwide are now women. 1 in 4, which does not sound like very much, but we'll take a win where we can. Even if it's a small win. It's a 2% increase from the previous year. And it's up from 1 in 5 women lawmakers in the year 2011. So now let's ask the golden question. How was this achieved? And we found that there was one decisive factor, quotas. They seem to have worked. When quotas, either legislative or voluntary, required a minimum number of female candidates, around 31% of women were elected to parliament. In countries with no quotas, women representation was about 21%. And this was not the only factor. Some others were also at play, like increased awareness of discrimination and attention to gender-sensitive and family-friendly policies due to COVID. But 26% is the average number. There were variations across the world. The Americas had the maximum growth, about 35%. And some countries showed significant progress, like Australia. They have a historic record, about 57% seats won by women in the Senate in Australia. In other regions, growth stalled, like in Europe. Women's representation remained at 31% in 15 European countries. This has largely been the trend since 2017. What about Asia? Wide divides characterized outcomes in Asia. Senate in Japan saw record numbers of women elected, which is quite the feat, because this has historically been a male-dominated area in Japan. Meanwhile, India, the world's most populous democracy, remained in the lowest quartile in the world, with less than 3% increase. Big or small, growth in women's parliamentary representation is now a worldwide phenomenon. The question is it enough? What about gender parity? Well, that remains an elusive goal. Only 6 countries in the world have achieved it so far. They have an equal number of men and women in parliament. These countries are New Zealand, Cuba, Mexico, Nicaragua, Rwanda, and the United Arab Emirates. At the current rate, it could take 80 years for the rest of the world to catch up. What's stopping this from happening? Sexism, harassment, violence against women, lack of awareness, the list goes on. But this is a dawn of change, really, for women in politics. And this growth can be accelerated. So how do we get more women in politics? Apart from quotas, women can benefit from targeted training or financial support. Concrete policies to support working parents can help. Community programs can help foster leadership skills. And feminist policies can be introduced. They provide a framework for gender-related strategies. And they have immense potential. They've also become a growing trend. The latest case is Germany. It has released a feminist foreign policy. It aims to invest in gender equality through development policy. Some other countries have also introduced policies like these, like Sweden, Canada, France, Mexico. We know that politics does not work in isolation. It affects all facets of the society. So more women in politics means policies that help women everywhere, in all walks of life. Just by sheer inspiration, other areas could also see more women in leadership roles. It has a domino effect. Because you can't be what you can't see. Representation can make a world of difference. Of course, there is no one-size-fits-all solution here, but there's plenty that can and should be done. And finally, it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. We're starting with Japan. Tourists are coming back to Fukushima. Authorities are working hard to revive the tourism industry here. It was hard hit due to the pandemic and the aftermath of the nuclear disaster in Fukushima. In the US, people are still digging their way out of snow, and they're having fun with it. Some have pulled out their kayaks, while others are putting up free snow signs. Meanwhile, an Australian politician proposed to his partner during his speech in Parliament, and she said yes. And finally, women across the world rallied to mark the International Women's Day. We're leaving you with these visuals. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
And finally, she get married. I won't bring a ring out now because I'm not allowed to have any props, but it's securely stored at the moment, and I am planning, in fact, to bring it out very romantically tonight in the roughly 10 minutes between the kids falling asleep and us collapsing in exhaustion.